My in-laws treated me like help until they threw me out, never knowing I was building the empire that would take everything they thought they owned. Your wife's family treat you like your temporary help that overstayed their welcome? Well, let me tell you exactly how that plays out when you're married to someone whose family thinks they're American royalty. My wife came from old money, the kind where they name hospital wings after your great-grandfather and have oil paintings of dead relatives watching you eat dinner. Her family owned half the commercial district downtown, and they never let anyone forget it. When we got married, I thought I was joining a family. Turns out I was just getting a front-row seat to my own systematic humiliation. Every Sunday dinner at the family estate was like a masterclass in making someone feel small. I'd walk into that marble floor dining room, and the temperature would drop 10 degrees. Her father would barely acknowledge my existence with a grunt. Her mother would smile that plastic smile and ask about my little projects with the same tone you'd use to ask a child about finger painting. The worst part? My wife would sit there cutting her prime rib, acting like this was perfectly normal. Like watching your husband get treated like hired help was just another family tradition, right up there with their annual Hamptons vacation that I was never quite invited to. Pass the salt, her brother would say, looking right through me to grab it himself. Oh, didn't see you there. Every single time. This guy inherited Daddy's real estate empire and thought that made him smarter than everyone else. The same guy who needed Daddy to bail him out of 3 failed business ventures. But sure, I'm the one who doesn't belong at the table. Family photos were another level of petty. Holiday gatherings, anniversaries, birthdays. Somehow, I was always just out of frame, or they'd take a second shot, just the family, after including me in the first one. Guess which version made it to their social media? My wife would post these perfectly curated family moments, and there I was, cropped out like I was some random photobomber. The real genius was how they made financial decisions. Big family investments, property purchases, business moves, all discussed when I conveniently wasn't around. Then, they'd inform me later like I was getting a memo about someone else's life. Oh, we decided to buy another rental property. Hope that's okay with you, as if my opinion mattered in the slightest. My wife had mastered the art of making me feel like a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. She'd rearrange the house without mentioning it, change our weekend plans without asking, make dinner reservations for one less person, and then act surprised when I showed up. Oh, I thought you were working late again. I was working late, but not for the reason she thought. See, while they were all patting themselves on the back for being such successful old money aristocrats, I was building something they couldn't even comprehend. Real investments, real partnerships, real power. But they were too busy looking down their noses to notice. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening in October. I walked into what I thought was my home to find her entire family gathered in the living room. Her parents, her pompous brother, even her aunt, who usually only showed up when someone died or got married. They were all there, sitting like some kind of tribunal. My wife stood up, straightened her designer dress, and delivered the line that changed everything. Pack your things and get out. We're done pretending you belong here. The room went dead silent, except for the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Her father nodded approvingly. Her mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief like she was watching a touching movie scene. Her brother smirked like Christmas had come early. Finally, he muttered under his breath, "Took long enough." I looked around at these people who'd spent 5 years treating me like I was nothing. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not the polite, trying to fit in smile I'd been wearing for 5 years. A real smile. "You know what?" I said, my voice perfectly calm. "You're absolutely right. I don't belong here." I paused, watching their satisfied expressions. This place is way too small for what I've become. The confusion in their eyes was priceless. They'd expected begging, pleading, maybe some dramatic breakdown. Instead, they got a man who looked like he'd just been handed the best news of his life. "I'll be out by morning," I continued, heading toward the stairs. "Give me 12 hours, and you'll never have to see me again." As I climbed those stairs for the last time, I could hear them congratulating each other downstairs, celebrating like they just won some great victory. If they only knew what was about to hit them, they might have begged me to stay. But some lessons can only be learned the hard way, and they were about to get the education of their lifetime. Moving out of that house was like watching a nature documentary about vultures. They circled around, making sure I wasn't taking anything that belonged to the family. Her mother actually followed me into the bedroom with a clipboard, checking off items like I was some departing employee who might steal office supplies. "That lamp was a wedding gift from my sister," she announced, pointing at a hideous bronze thing I'd never wanted in the first place. "Keep it," I replied, folding my clothes into boxes. "I've got better taste now. Her father stationed himself in the hallway, arms crossed, watching every trip I made to my car like I was going to sprint out with the family silver. The guy had the nerve to time me with his Rolex, tapping it impatiently whenever I took longer than his arbitrary schedule allowed. "Moving's harder when you actually own things worth moving," I said, carrying out a box of my business files. His scowl deepened, but he didn't respond. Smart man. My wife supervised the whole operation from the living room, playing the role of the wounded victim for her family's benefit. She'd sniffle dramatically whenever one of them looked her way, but I caught her checking her phone and scrolling through Instagram between performances, already planning her post-divorce social media comeback. No doubt her brother was the worst. This guy couldn't resist running his mouth, making little comments every time I passed through. "Don't forget your participation trophies," he said when I packed my old college awards. Finally getting that room back for something useful when I emptied what used to be my home office. The family had gathered on the front porch like they were watching a parade. Neighbors started to notice the commotion, and I could see curtains twitching in windows across the street. Perfect. They wanted a show, so I'd give them one they'd never forget. "You know," I said, loading the last box into my truck, "I should thank you all." They exchanged glances, clearly not expecting gratitude from their freshly evicted son-in-law. "For 5 years, I've been trying to figure out how to tell you what I really think of this whole charade." I gestured toward the house, toward them, toward the perfectly manicured lawn that screamed, "Look how successful we are," adding, "But you just gave me the perfect opportunity." Her father stepped forward, puffing his chest like an old rooster. "Now see here, you ungrateful. I laughed, and the sound made them all shift uncomfortably. "Oh, I'm grateful. All right, grateful that I finally get to stop pretending this circus matters." My wife's face went pale. She knew that tone. She had heard it exactly once before during our engagement when her ex-boyfriend tried to cause drama at our rehearsal dinner. That was the night she learned I wasn't the pushover her family thought they'd found. "You see, while you've all been playing house with Daddy's money, some of us have been building real empires." I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a particular photo, and held it up. "Remember when you bought that strip mall downtown last year? The one you were so proud of?" Her father's face changed just slightly, but enough. "Funny thing about commercial real estate," I continued, "there's always paperwork involved, deeds, surveys, property lines, that sort of thing. Amazing what you can learn when you actually read the fine print instead of just signing whatever your lawyer puts in front of you." The silence stretched out like a rubber band about to snap. Even the neighbors had stopped pretending they weren't watching. "But don't worry," I said, climbing into my truck. "I'm sure it's nothing that can't be worked out eventually." I started the engine and rolled down the window. My wife finally found her voice. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, stepping off the porch. "Oh, sweetheart," I replied, shifting into reverse. "You'll figure it out soon enough. You're all so smart after all. Such successful business people. I'm sure you'll connect the dots." As I backed out of that driveway for the last time, I could see them in my rearview mirror, huddled together like conspirators trying to decode a message. Her father was already pulling out his phone, probably calling his lawyer. Her brother looked like someone had just told him Santa wasn't real. But my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, was staring at my truck with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. Real, genuine fear that maybe she'd just made the biggest mistake of her privileged little life. I drove 3 blocks before pulling over and making my first phone call. "It's time," I said when the voice answered. "They just made it easy for us." The voice on the other end chuckled. "How easy? They threw me out like garbage in front of the whole neighborhood. Perfect. That makes what comes next so much sweeter." I hung up and looked back toward the house I just left. Tomorrow their real education would begin. Tonight they could celebrate their little victory. They'd earned it. After all, it was going to be the last celebration they'd have for a very long time. You want to know the real joke? While they were treating me like I sold insurance door to door, I was quietly becoming everything they pretended to be. See, old money families have one fatal flaw. They think wealth is inherited, not earned. They never saw the empire being built right under their noses. 5 years ago, when her family first started their little humiliation campaign, I made a decision. Instead of fighting for scraps of respect at their dinner table, I'd build my own table, a bigger one. Those little projects her mother loved to mock. They weren't projects at all. They were acquisitions. While her father was buying another yacht he'd use twice a year, I was purchasing commercial properties in emerging neighborhoods. While her brother was playing golf with other trust fund babies, I was forming partnerships with developers who actually knew how to create value. The beauty was in the simplicity. They were so convinced I was beneath them that they never bothered to investigate what I actually did for work. Something with computers, her mother would tell her friends with that dismissive wave. If she'd looked closer, she would have discovered that something with computers meant software solutions for property management companies across 3 states. But the real masterpiece was the land deal. 2 years ago, the city announced plans to expand the downtown district, public information available to anyone smart enough to look. While her family was celebrating their strip mall purchase, patting themselves on the back for their business acumen, I was researching the property histories. Turns out their precious strip mall sat on land with some very interesting legal complications. The original deed from 1962 had a clause that most people would overlook, a right of first refusal that had never been properly transferred. For 60 years, that clause sat dormant, buried in courthouse records that nobody bothered to check. Nobody except me. I spent 6 months tracking down the descendants of the original landowner, found them living quietly in Portland, completely unaware of what they possessed. A simple conversation, a fair offer, and suddenly I owned a piece of paper that made their strip mall purchase very, very complicated. But I didn't stop there. That would have been amateur hour. While they were focused on their one property, I was mapping out the entire development zone. Every parcel, every owner, every potential acquisition. I formed a limited liability company, brought in silent partners with real money, not inherited money, but actual working capital, and we started buying the parking lot behind their strip mall. Mine. The vacant lot across the street. Mine. The old gas station on the corner that they'd been trying to buy for months. Mine. Purchased 6 weeks before they even made their first offer. Her father thought he was so clever buying that strip mall. He had no idea he'd just purchased the most expensive landlocked property in the city. Without access to my parcels, his investment was worthless. But with my cooperation, it could be part of something extraordinary. I had lawyers, real ones, not the country club friends her family used for their simple transactions. We filed papers, established development rights, and created a legal framework that would make their heads spin. Everything was legitimate, everything was documented, and everything was designed to give me absolute control over their crown jewel investment. The phone call I made after leaving their house went to my business partner, a guy who'd started with nothing and built a construction empire worth 8 figures. Self-made, like me. He understood what it meant to be underestimated. The family just accelerated our timeline, I told him. Good, he replied. I was getting tired of waiting. When do we make contact? Give them 72 hours to figure out they're in trouble. Then we introduce ourselves properly. The sweetest part, I tried to bring them into the deal originally. About 1 year ago, I'd attempted to discuss a joint venture with her father. Nothing specific, just feeling out whether they'd be interested in some collaborative opportunities. He dismissed me with that condescending chuckle of his. Son, he'd said, when you've been in business as long as I have, you learn to spot real opportunities. This sounds like something for smaller players. Smaller players, right? While he was giving me that lecture, I was already 3 months into acquiring the properties that would make his investment completely dependent on my goodwill. But hey, he had experience, right? Inherited experience. I spent the next day in my real office, not the spare bedroom they designated as my little workspace, but the actual downtown office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the district they thought they controlled. My assistant brought me coffee while I reviewed the development plans we'd been finalizing for months. 22 parcels, 18 different property owners, 16 months of negotiations, legal work, and strategic acquisitions. One massive mixed-use development that would transform the entire downtown core, shopping, dining, residential, office space, a complete urban renewal project worth $50 million. And sitting right in the middle of it all, like a puzzle piece that didn't fit, was their little strip mall, the property they'd been so proud to acquire, not realizing they just bought themselves a front-row seat to watch me rebuild their world. My phone buzzed with a text from my attorney. Documents are ready. When do you want to serve notice? I looked out my window at the district spread below. Somewhere down there, they were probably having lunch, congratulating themselves on finally getting rid of the dead weight they'd been carrying, celebrating their liberation from the guy who didn't belong. I typed back, tomorrow morning, and make sure they get copies at the house, at their offices, and at the country club. I want this to be thorough. 3 years of building, planning, and preparing. Tonight I'd sleep in my own bed, not the one in their house where I never belonged, but in my actual home. The penthouse I'd owned for 2 years that they didn't even know existed. Tomorrow, they'd learn what happens when you underestimate someone who actually knows how to build an empire. The legal papers hit them like a freight train at rush hour. 3 different locations, 3 different times, all within the span of 2 hours. Maximum impact, minimum chance of avoiding the inevitable. Her father got served first, right at his office in the family building downtown. My attorney made sure to arrive during the lunch hour, when the lobby was full of potential witnesses. Nothing quite like getting handed a legal notice in front of your business associates to really set the tone for your afternoon. My wife received hers at the country club, where she was having her usual Tuesday lunch with the other trust fund wives. The server walked right up to their table, verified her identity, and handed over the documentation while she was mid-sip of her $15 martini. From what I heard, she went pale and excused herself to the ladies' room for 20 minutes. Her brother got the honor of receiving his papers at the golf course on the 7th tee in front of his regular foursome. Nothing says your financial world is about to collapse like being served legal documents while you're lining up a drive. By 3 o'clock, all their phones were ringing. Lawyers, accountants, family members, business partners. Everyone trying to figure out what exactly these papers meant and why none of them had seen this coming. The documents were beautiful works of legal craftsmanship. 23 pages of carefully worded notifications, property surveys, deed complications, and development notices. But the core message was simple. Their strip mall investment was sitting on legally contested land, and they had 90 days to resolve the matter, or face potential seizure proceedings. Her father was the first to crack. He called me directly, which showed either remarkable courage or devastating stupidity. Probably the latter. "What the hell is this about?" he demanded when I answered. "Good afternoon to you too," I replied, settling back in my office chair. "I assume you're referring to the legal documentation you received today. You know damn well what I'm referring to. This nonsense about property disputes and development rights. What are you trying to pull?" "I'm not trying to pull anything. I'm informing you that your recent property purchase has some complications you apparently weren't aware of." The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. I could practically hear him thinking, trying to figure out how his expensive lawyers had missed something this significant. "This is harassment," he finally said. "Pure and simple harassment because we threw you out. Actually, it's business, pure and simple business that you should have researched before making a $50 million mistake." "$50 million? The property cost us $12 million. "Oh, I'm not talking about what you paid for it. I'm talking about what it's going to cost you to fix the problem you just inherited." Another silence, longer this time. "I'm calling my lawyers," he said. "You should. In fact, you should call several lawyers, maybe some who specialize in property disputes rather than just estate planning and golf course memberships." I hung up and immediately got a call from my business partner. "How's the panic level over there?" he asked, rising steadily. "Give it another hour and they'll be in full meltdown mode." "Good. My construction crews are ready to start site preparation as soon as you give the word." "Not yet. Let them marinate in this for a few days. I want them to fully understand their situation before we offer them a way out." The beauty of the whole setup was its legitimacy. Every document was real. Every claim was valid. Every legal argument was bulletproof. I hadn't manufactured a crisis. I'd simply revealed one that had been waiting decades for someone smart enough to find it. Her mother called next, crying into the phone about how cruel I was being to the family that had welcomed me with open arms. Apparently, systematic humiliation qualified as a warm welcome in her world. I let her vent for about 30 seconds before interrupting. "Did you actually read the papers, or are you just calling to complain?" "What? The legal documents. Did you read them, or did you just see my name and assume this was some kind of revenge plot?" "Well, of course this is revenge. You're angry about the divorce, so you're trying to hurt us financially. Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't need a divorce to hurt you financially. I could have done that any time in the past 3 years. The question is, why didn't your lawyers catch this before you bought the property?" That stopped her cold, because suddenly she was thinking like a businesswoman instead of a scorned mother-in-law. And businesswomen asked practical questions. "What do you mean, catch what?" "The deed complications, the development restrictions, the access rights, all of it should have been flagged during the title search. But our lawyers said everything was clear." "Your lawyers said what you wanted to hear. There's a difference." By evening, the whole family had converged at the big house for an emergency meeting. I knew this because my wife called me, and I could hear the chaos in the background. Voices raised, paper shuffling, someone pacing back and forth on what sounded like marble floors. "We need to talk," she said. "We are talking in person tonight." "I don't think so. I'm busy." "Busy with what? Destroying my family?" "Busy building a development project. Your family situation is just an unfortunate side effect of poor research and worse legal advice." "Cut the act. What do you want?" I want your family to understand that actions have consequences. For 5 years, you treated me like I was nothing, like I didn't matter, like I didn't belong anywhere near your precious legacy. So, this is revenge. No, this is business. Revenge would be personal. This is just what happens when entitled people make assumptions about who's actually in control. I could hear her father yelling in the background. Something about calling the mayor and fixing this through political connections. Good luck with that. The mayor was actually one of my silent partners in the development project. What's it going to take to make this go away, she asked. Make what go away? Your family's legal problems. Those are real problems that require real solutions. But I'm a reasonable man. I'm sure we can work something out. What kind of something? The kind of something that acknowledges which one of us actually knows how to build an empire, and which one of us just inherited daddy's leftovers. You're enjoying this immensely, but I'm also offering you a business opportunity. The question is whether your family is smart enough to recognize it, or too proud to admit they need help from someone they thought didn't belong. The line went quiet, except for the continued arguing in the background. I'll call you tomorrow, she finally said. No, you won't. Tomorrow you'll be too busy dealing with lawyers and accountants and trying to figure out how to salvage your family's investment. When you're ready to have a real conversation about real solutions, you know where to find me. And where's that? At the top of the food chain where I've been all along. You just weren't paying attention. 3 days of radio silence, 3 days of them scrambling, calling lawyers, having emergency family meetings, and probably losing sleep over the legal nightmare I dropped in their laps. Then, exactly as I predicted, my phone rang. We need to meet, her father said. No greeting, no pleasantries. Just straight to business, do we? I'm pretty comfortable with how things stand right now. Don't play games. You know, we need to resolve this. Resolve what exactly? Your failure to do proper due diligence before making a major property investment? That's not really my problem to solve. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end. The great patriarch of the family empire, reduced to begging for help from the son-in-law he'd spent years treating like hired help. Name your terms, he said finally. My terms for what? For whatever it's going to take to make this situation workable. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not looking to make this workable for you. I'm looking to make it profitable for me. Fine. What's your price? The desperation in his voice was almost sad. Almost. But then I remembered 5 years of condescending smiles, dismissive comments, and being treated like I was some charity case his daughter had mistakenly married. My price isn't money, it's respect. Something your family has never quite figured out how to pay. What does that mean? It means we meet on my terms, at my office, with your entire family present. And this time, everyone listens when I talk. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. My office, my conference room, my rules. I made sure my assistant set up the space properly. Fresh coffee, bottled water, and a view of the downtown district that showed exactly how much of it I controlled. They arrived like they were attending a funeral. Her father in his best suit, trying to project authority he no longer possessed. Her mother clutching her purse like it contained the family jewels. Her brother fidgeting with his phone, probably calculating how much money they stood to lose. And my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week. The stress of watching her family's empire crack was wearing on her. Please sit, I said, gesturing to the chairs arranged on one side of the conference table. I took my place at the head, where the person in charge sits. Before we begin, her father started. I want you to know that our lawyers have reviewed. Stop. I held up a hand and he actually stopped talking. Your lawyers are the reason you're in this mess. If you'd hired competent legal counsel instead of your golf buddies, you would have discovered these complications before you bought the property. Now see here. No, you see here. I opened the folder in front of me and spread out the documents. These are copies of every deed, survey, and legal filing related to your strip mall property, going back 60 years. This, I pointed to a specific clause, is the provision your lawyers missed. And this, I pointed to another document, is the current legal standing that makes your ownership problematic. Her brother leaned forward, squinting at the papers. What does that actually mean? It means you own a building on land you don't fully control. It means any development plans you had are subject to my approval. It means your $50 million investment is worth exactly what I decide it's worth. The room went dead silent. I let them absorb that for a full minute before continuing. But I'm not unreasonable. I'm prepared to offer you a way forward. What kind of way forward? Her mother asked quietly. A partnership. Your property becomes part of my development project. You maintain ownership of your building, but it operates within the framework I've created for the entire district. And if we refuse, her father asked, then you spend the next 3 years in court, fighting a legal battle you can't win, watching your investment lose value while I develop everything around you. Your strip mall becomes a tiny island surrounded by my project, accessible only through roads I control, with utilities I manage. Her brother's face went white. You're talking about economic warfare. I'm talking about business. The same kind of business your family has been conducting for generations, except now you're on the receiving end instead of the dealing end. My wife finally spoke up. What do you get out of this partnership? Control, decision-making authority over the entire development. Your family provides capital and property. I provide vision and execution. That's not a partnership, her father said. That's a takeover. Call it whatever makes you comfortable, but those are the terms. And if we agree to this arrangement, what happens to the family business? I smiled. The same smile I'd given them the night they threw me out, but now they understood what it meant. Your family business becomes part of my business. You continue to profit, but under my direction. Think of it as a management transition. You want us to work for you? Her mother said, the realization dawning on her face. I want you to learn what it means to be part of a real empire instead of just playing dress-up with daddy's money. Her father stood up abruptly. This is insane. We're not going to hand over everything we've built to someone who what? I interrupted, standing to meet his gaze. Someone who married into your family? Someone you never thought was good enough? Someone you treated like hired help for 5 years? The color drained from his face. Or someone who outplayed you so completely that you didn't even realize the game was happening until it was over. We need time to think, my wife said. No, you don't. You need time to accept reality. The thinking should have happened before you bought property without proper legal review. The thinking should have happened before you decided to humiliate me in front of the entire neighborhood. I walked to the window and looked out at the district below. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, I move forward with or without your cooperation. But with your cooperation, you maintain some dignity and some profit. Without it, I turn back to face them. Without it, you become a cautionary tale about what happens when old money meets new ambition. They filed out of my office like defeated soldiers. No handshakes, no pleasantries. Just the hollow sound of expensive shoes on marble floors. My assistant came in after they left. How did it go? Exactly as planned. By Monday, they'll realize they don't have any choice but to accept my terms. And if they don't, then they'll learn what it really means to lose everything. But they're smarter than they are proud. They'll come around. I sat back down at my desk and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there, the family that had spent years making me feel small was discovering what it felt like to be powerless. The student had become the teacher, the unwanted guest had become the landlord, and the man who didn't belong was about to own everything they thought was theirs. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. My phone rang exactly when I expected it to. We accept your terms, her father said. No negotiation, no counteroffer, complete surrender. Smart choice. My lawyers will draw up the partnership agreements by end of business today. You'll have them for review tomorrow morning, and the other matters, the legal complications with our property, will be resolved as part of our new arrangement. Consider it a signing bonus. What they didn't know was that I'd already scheduled the groundbreaking ceremony for the following week. City officials, local media, business leaders, everyone who mattered would be there to watch the transformation of downtown begin. The ceremony was perfect. Picture-perfect weather, perfect turnout, perfect symbolism. I stood at the podium overlooking the district I now controlled, addressing a crowd that included every person who had ever doubted me. Today marks the beginning of something extraordinary, I announced. A $50 million development that will transform this district into the premier commercial and residential destination in the region. In the crowd, I could see my wife's family standing together, applauding politely. They looked exactly like what they were now, junior partners in someone else's vision. Her father approached me after the ceremony. You got what you wanted, he said quietly. No, I replied, watching construction crews begin setting up equipment. I got what I earned. There's a difference. What happens now? Now you learn what it means to be part of a real business, instead of just inheriting one. Your son starts in project management, reporting to my development team. Your wife oversees community relations with full accountability for results. And you? I paused, letting him wait for his assignment. You get to explain to everyone at the country club how the son-in-law you threw out became the man who now signs your paychecks. The transformation took 18 months. By the time we finished, the downtown district was unrecognizable. Luxury apartments, high-end retail, 3 restaurants and a boutique hotel. Property values doubled. Tax revenue tripled. The mayor called it an economic miracle. I called it Tuesday. My ex-wife, the divorce finalized 6 months earlier, tried to reconcile during the project's final phase. She showed up at my penthouse one evening, looking like the woman I'd married instead of the entitled princess who'd thrown me out. "I made a mistake," she said. "Several mistakes. Which one are you referring to?" "All of them. Treating you like you didn't matter, letting my family influence me, throwing you out instead of fighting for us. And now I see what you really built, what you were building all along while we were too blind to notice." I looked at her, standing in the doorway of the home she'd never known existed. The penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the district we developed together, except only one of us had known we were partners. "The woman I married wouldn't have needed her family's permission to respect her husband," I said finally. "The woman I married would have been building this empire with me instead of against me. I could be that woman. Now, no, you can't. That woman would have seen my potential before I proved it. That woman would have defended me instead of participating in my humiliation." She left without another word. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. 6 months later, I was named Businessman of the Year by the Chamber of Commerce. The ceremony was held in the ballroom of the hotel I developed. Her family attended. Naturally, they were still technically my business partners after all. During my acceptance speech, I thanked everyone who had contributed to the project's success. I mentioned the construction crews, the city officials, the investors, even the previous property owners who had made it all possible. I did not mention the family, sitting at table number 12, watching the man they treated like nothing, except recognition for rebuilding their world. Because some acknowledgments have to be earned, and respect, once lost, becomes a privilege that must be granted by those who were denied it. The boy they threw out had become the man who decided who stayed and who went. The unwanted guest had become the host of their new reality, and the empire I built from their dismissal became the foundation of everything they would never control again. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.